Maya Winters thought she knew everything about the quiet old man who'd left her a dusty marine supply store on the Oregon coast. But when a team of Navy SEALs arrived seeking shelter during the worst storm in decades, she discovered her grandfather wasn't just any veteran. He was the legendary Kodiak, the man who'd trained America's most elite warriors. What started as an act of kindness nearly cost Maya her life until she learned that some legacies run deeper than blood. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The weatherman had called for light rain, maybe some wind. What Maya Winters got instead was the kind of Pacific storm that turned Highway 101 into a ribbon of black ice and sent fishing boats scrambling for the nearest harbor. She stood behind the counter of Kodiak's Marine Outfitters, watching the local news anchors increasingly frantic updates about the unprecedented tempest barreling down the Oregon coast. Sustained winds of 80 miles per hour, the anchor reported, his usual calm demeanor cracking. Coastal floating expected, all non-essential travel strongly discouraged. Maya glanced out the salt-stained windows of her grandfather's store and watched the first sheets of rain slam against the glass like thrown gravel. The marine supply shop sat at the junction of Highway 101 and Seal Rock Bay Road, a weathered building that had served the local fishing community for over 30 years. Hand-painted signs advertised everything from nautical rope to emergency flares, and the parking lot was usually filled with pickup trucks belonging to crab fishermen and weekend sailors. Today, it was empty, except for Maya's ancient Subaru, which rocked gently in the strengthening wind. Maya had inherited the store 18 months ago when her grandfather, Jack Winters, passed away at 78. She'd barely known the man. Her father had been estranged from his own father for reasons no one ever fully explained. Family gatherings were awkward affairs where Grandpa Jack was mentioned in hushed tones, if at all. He was different after the war, was all her father would say. Some men come back changed. What Maya remembered was a quiet, imposing figure who smelled like salt water and engine oil. He'd visit maybe twice a year, always arriving unannounced in a pristine Ford pickup truck, always bringing her books about marine exploration or marine biology. He'd stay for dinner, exchange polite conversation with her parents, then disappear back to his coastal world. Maya had been 25 when he died, and she'd been shocked to learn he'd left her everything. The inheritance had been a mixed blessing. Maya had been working as a marine biology researcher in Portland, scraping by on grant funding and adjunct teaching positions. Suddenly, she owned property, inventory, and a business she knew nothing about. Her parents had urged her to sell immediately. "That old place is more trouble than it's worth," her father had said. Jack always was stubborn about holding on to things he should have let go. But something about the store had called to her. Maybe it was the way the morning light reflected off the harbor or the steady rhythm of waves against the rocky shore. Maybe it was the sense that her grandfather had left her more than just a business. He'd left her a mystery she was meant to solve. The past year and a half had been a crash course in small business ownership and coastal living. Maya had learned to identify different types of nets, stock marine batteries, and recommend the right life jackets for weekend kayakers. The regular customers, gruff fishermen with hands like leather and weekend sailors with more money than sense, had gradually accepted her as Jack's granddaughter, though they clearly missed the old man's expertise. Eddie Kowalski knew these waters better than most folks know their own backyard, Eddie Kowalski had told her just last week. Eddie was a retired Coast Guard veteran who'd become her unofficial mentor, teaching her which customers to trust and which suppliers offered the best prices. 30 years he ran this place, never lost a fisherman to bad equipment. That's a hell of a legacy. But legacy was exactly what Maya struggled with. She'd been going through her grandfather's personal effects slowly, reluctant to disturb his private space in the apartment above the store. What she'd found so far painted the picture of a solitary man with simple tastes. Fishing magazines, technical manuals for engines, and photographs of the Oregon coast in different seasons. There were a few military items, an old sea bag, some ribbons in a drawer, but nothing that explained the wall of silence that had surrounded Jack Winters' service record. The storm was picking up intensity now, driving rain horizontally across the parking lot and making the old building creak ominously. Maya had closed early, sending her part-time employee home before the roads became impassable. She was alone now, except for the radio chatter from the Marine Band, where fishing boats reported their positions and harbor authorities coordinated emergency responses. She was about to lock up and head upstairs to her grandfather's apartment when she noticed something odd. In the storage room behind the counter, a section of wall paneling had warped slightly in the humidity, revealing what looked like a gap. Maya had walked past that wall hundreds of times, but tonight the wooden panel was slightly ajar, as if the storm's atmospheric pressure had shifted something inside the building's structure. Curiosity overcoming caution, Maya grabbed a flashlight and pried at the loose panel. It swung open easily, revealing a hidden compartment she'd never known existed. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth and protected from moisture, was a collection of items that made her heart stop. Military medals she didn't recognize, their ribbons pristine despite their obvious age. Photographs of men in combat gear, faces painted with camouflage, standing in what looked like jungle settings. A leather-bound journal, filled with her grandfather's precise handwriting. And most shocking of all, a framed photograph showing a much younger Jack Winters in dress uniform, shaking hands with a man Maya recognized from history books, a famous admiral whose name was synonymous with America's most elite naval special operations. Maya's hands trembled as she opened the journal to a random page. The entries were dated from the 1980s and 1990s, written in military shorthand that was difficult to decipher. But certain phrases jumped out at her. Selection complete, 18 candidates advanced. Hell Week modifications showing improved results. Psychological profiles indicate exceptional resilience under pressure. She flipped to another section and found what appeared to be training schedules and evaluation notes. Names of young men, their strengths and weaknesses analyzed in clinical detail, performance metrics for swimming, diving, weapons proficiency, and something called stress inoculation. At the bottom of one page, in her grandfather's careful script, she read, "The mind breaks before the body. Our job is to forge minds that cannot be broken." The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. Her grandfather hadn't just been a Navy veteran, he'd been involved in training the most elite warriors in the American military. The quiet man who'd sold fishing tackle and boat parts had once shaped the men who carried out the most dangerous missions in the world. Thunder crashed overhead, so loud it seemed to shake the entire building. Maya quickly rewrapped the items and closed the hidden compartment, her mind racing. Everything she'd thought she knew about Jack Winters was wrong. The man her family had described as a recluse, as someone damaged by war, had actually been entrusted with one of the military's most critical responsibilities. She was still processing this revelation when she heard the sound of vehicles pulling into the parking lot. Through the rain-lashed windows, she could see headlights cutting through the storm. Multiple vehicles, moving in formation despite the terrible conditions. Maya's pulse quickened. No one should be traveling in weather like this unless it was an emergency. The vehicles stopped, and she watched as figures in dark clothing emerged from what appeared to be military transport vehicles. They moved with purpose and precision, their formation tight despite the wind and rain. As they approached the store, she could make out military-style gear and what looked like naval insignia. A sharp knock echoed through the store, urgent but controlled. Maya approached the door cautiously, peering through the glass at a group of men who, despite being soaked by the storm, maintained perfect military bearing. The man in front was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of commanding presence that comes from years of leadership in dangerous situations. "Madam," he called through the door, his voice barely audible over the storm, "we're Navy SEALs conducting training operations in the area. Our vehicles are having mechanical issues, and we need shelter until the storm passes. We saw your lights on." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Navy SEALs, here, at her grandfather's store, on the night she'd discovered his secret connection to their world. The coincidence was staggering, almost impossible to believe. But as she looked at the men standing in the storm, their discipline evident even in the chaos of the weather, She thought about her grandfather's journal and his dedication to training America's finest warriors. "Just a moment," she called back, fumbling with the locks. As she opened the door, the full fury of the storm hit her, driving rain into the store and nearly knocking her backward. The SEALs filed in quickly, their leader offering a grateful nod. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, water dripping from his tactical gear. "I'm Lieutenant Cole Hartman. This is my team. We'll be out of your way as soon as the weather clears." Maya stared at the 6 men now standing in her grandfather's store, their presence somehow both reassuring and unsettling. They looked exactly like what she'd expect Navy SEALs to look like: fit, alert, professional. But something nagged at her, some instinct she couldn't quite identify. "Of course," she managed, closing the door against the storm. "I'm Maya Winters. This is my store. Well, my grandfather's store. Can I get you coffee, dry towels?" Lieutenant Hartman smiled, and Maya noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. "That would be greatly appreciated. Your grandfather must have been quite a man to build a business in a place like this." "He was," Maya replied, thinking of the hidden compartment and its secrets. "More than I ever knew." As she bustled about preparing coffee and gathering towels, Maya felt the weight of the SEALs' attention. They were professionals, she told herself. They were here by coincidence, seeking shelter like any travelers caught in a storm. But her grandfather's journal had taught her to pay attention to details, to trust her instincts. And her instincts were telling her that this was no coincidence at all. The power flickered twice before dying completely, plunging Kodiak's marine outfitters into darkness, broken only by the emergency lighting Maya had installed after her first winter storm. The backup generator in the storage room coughed to life, its diesel engine providing enough electricity to keep the essential systems running: lights, heat, and the marine radio that connected the store to the outside world. Lieutenant Hartman and his team had spread throughout the main floor of the store, their tactical gear dripping steadily onto the worn linoleum. Maya noticed how they positioned themselves with military precision, one near the front entrance, another by the back door, a third with a clear view of both the stairs leading to her apartment and the storage room where she'd made her discovery about her grandfather. "Quite a storm," Hartman commented, accepting the steaming mug of coffee Maya offered. His eyes swept the store's interior, taking in every detail with the methodical attention of someone conducting reconnaissance. "You're lucky to have backup power. Most places out here would be completely dark by now." "My grandfather was prepared for anything," Maya replied, studying Hartman's face in the generator's harsh lighting. There was something about his features that bothered her. Too smooth, too unmarked for someone who claimed to be an active SEAL. The men she'd met through the store's fishing clientele all bore the weathered marks of their profession. Hartman looked like he'd spent more time behind a desk than in combat zones. The marine radio crackled with emergency chatter as Coast Guard vessels reported their positions and fishing boats confirmed they'd reached safe harbor. Maya adjusted the frequency, listening to the familiar rhythm of maritime communication that had become the soundtrack of her life since inheriting the store. But tonight, something in the radio traffic made her pause. "Coast Guard Station Newport to all vessels," a crisp voice announced. "Be advised, we have reports of stolen military vehicles in the coastal area. If you observe any suspicious activity, do not approach. Repeat, do not approach. Report immediately to authorities." Maya's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. Stolen military vehicles? She glanced at Hartman, who seemed completely absorbed in organizing his team's gear. If he'd heard the radio announcement, he showed no reaction. But Maya noticed how the youngest member of his team, a kid who couldn't be more than 22, had gone pale at the Coast Guard's words. "Is everything all right with your vehicles?" Maya asked carefully. "I heard something about mechanical problems." "Nothing serious," Hartman replied smoothly. "These coastal storms play havoc with electronics. We'll have everything sorted once the weather clears." His smile was practiced, professional, but Maya caught something else in his expression, a flash of calculation that made her skin crawl. While Hartman spoke with his men in low voices, Maya excused herself to check the generator. The storage room felt different now that she knew about the hidden compartment. As she adjusted the diesel engine settings, her eyes kept drifting to the wall panel that concealed her grandfather's secrets. The journal she'd found was filled with insights about reading people, about detecting deception and assessing threats. Jack Winters had trained men to survive in situations where a single mistake could be fatal. One passage came back to her with startling clarity. Trust is earned through consistency over time. Anyone can maintain a facade for hours or even days, but under pressure, true nature always emerges. Watch the eyes, the hands, the breathing. The body reveals what the mind tries to hide. Maya forced herself to return to the main store carrying an armload of dry towels and keeping her expression neutral. As she distributed the towels among Hartman's team, she began applying her grandfather's lessons. The lieutenant's breathing was too controlled, the rhythm of someone consciously managing their stress response. His hands, while steady, showed no calluses or scars I'd expect from years of rope work, weapons handling, or maritime operations. But it was the team's youngest member who worried me most. While the others maintained their military bearing, he fidgeted constantly, his eyes darting between Hartman and the exits. When Maya offered him a towel, their fingers brushed briefly, and I felt the tremor in his hands. "Thank you, ma'am," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the generator's rumble. For just a moment, their eyes met, and Maya saw something that chilled her. Desperation, maybe even fear. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. "Jeremy, ma'am. Jeremy Davis." He glanced nervously at Hartman, who was examining a nautical chart on the far wall. "We really appreciate your hospitality. Not everyone would open their doors to strangers in a storm like this." There was something in the way he emphasized strangers that made my pulse quicken. Before she could respond, Hartman appeared at her elbow with the silent efficiency she was beginning to associate with predators. "Davis, help Murphy secure the perimeter," he ordered. The young man snapped to attention and moved away, but not before shooting Maya another loaded glance.
"He's new to the team," Hartman explained, his tone conversational but his eyes cold, still learning to handle the pressure of operations. "What kind of operations?" Maya asked, testing. "Training exercises, mostly. Building readiness for potential deployments." Hartman's answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. "Your grandfather served, didn't he? I noticed some military decorations behind the counter." Maya's blood chilled. She'd been so focused on the hidden compartment that she'd forgotten about the few items her grandfather had displayed publicly: a small American flag, a faded photograph of a naval vessel, and the shadow box containing ribbons she never bothered to identify. "Navy, during Vietnam," she lied smoothly, following an instinct she didn't fully understand. Something told her that revealing what she'd actually discovered would be dangerous. He didn't talk about it much. "The quiet heroes often don't," Hartman agreed, but his attention had shifted to the shadow box. Maya watched his eyes narrow as he studied the ribbons, and she realized with growing alarm that he was reading them like a military resume. Whatever was in that display case, it meant something to someone with real military knowledge. The storm was reaching its peak now, with wind speeds that made the building shake and rain that sounded like machine gun fire against the windows. Maya found herself thinking about her grandfather's journal again, particularly the sections about psychological warfare and the importance of maintaining operational security. Jack Winters understood that information was a weapon and that sometimes survival depended on controlling what your enemies knew about you. The Marine radio erupted with urgent chatter as a Coast Guard cutter reported encountering debris in the water, vehicle parts that matched the description of the stolen military transports. Maya kept her expression neutral, but she noticed how Hartman's jaw tightened and how his team unconsciously shifted positions as if preparing for action. "Sounds like someone had a rough night," Maya commented, adjusting the radio's volume. "The ocean's unforgiving in weather like this," Hartman replied, but his casual tone didn't match the tension in his shoulders. That's when Maya made a decision that would have made her grandfather proud. Instead of confronting her suspicions directly, she began to gather intelligence. Under the pretense of being a gracious host, she moved through the store, observing and listening. She noted how the team communicated in glances rather than words, how they maintained sightlines to all exits, and how their gear was arranged for quick access rather than comfort. Most telling of all was what she discovered when she offered to help one of the men clean his weapon. A real SEAL would never let a civilian handle his equipment, but this man hesitated just long enough to reveal he wasn't sure how to refuse without breaking character. By midnight, Maya was certain of three things. These men were not Navy SEALs, they were running from something serious enough to risk traveling in a deadly storm, and her grandfather's hidden legacy was somehow connected to their presence. The question was whether Jeremy Davis was a willing participant or another victim of whatever Lieutenant Cole Hartman was really planning. As the storm raged outside and the generator maintained its steady rhythm, Maya Winters found herself drawing on lessons she'd never known she'd learned. Her grandfather's training methods were designed to forge warriors who could think under pressure, adapt to changing circumstances, and never surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. Tonight, she would discover if those lessons applied to granddaughters as well as SEALs.
The Marine radio fell silent just after 1 a.m. Its last transmission a Coast Guard warning about dangerous surf conditions and a request for all vessels to maintain emergency watch. Maya used the sudden quiet to slip upstairs to her grandfather's apartment, claiming she needed to check for storm damage. What she really needed was time to process what she'd discovered and access more of her grandfather's hidden materials. The apartment above the store was spartanly furnished but meticulously organized, reflecting the military precision that had apparently defined Jack Winters' entire adult life. Maya had been living here for 18 months, but she'd barely scratched the surface of understanding the man who'd called this place home for 3 decades. Tonight, with potential danger lurking downstairs, she was seeing everything through new eyes. She returned to the hidden compartment behind the loose panel, this time removing several items she'd only glanced at earlier. The leather journal was thicker than she had initially realized, containing not just training notes but detailed psychological profiles and what appeared to be after-action reports from missions she couldn't begin to imagine. One section made her hands tremble as she read, "Subject demonstrated exceptional resistance to enhanced interrogation techniques. Recommend immediate advancement to advanced survival training. Note, psychological resilience may be genetic factor worth investigating in family screening protocols." Family screening protocols. Maya's throat constricted as she realized her grandfather hadn't just trained SEALs, he'd been involved in selecting them, identifying the rare individuals who possessed the mental fortitude necessary for the most dangerous missions in the world. The quiet man who'd brought her books about marine biology had been studying the deepest mysteries of human courage and resilience. Another entry caught her attention. Training facility compromised by security breach. 3 candidates and 1 instructor unaccounted for. Implementing emergency protocols for asset protection. Personal effects secured in secondary location until threat assessment complete. The date on the entry was less than 2 years ago, shortly before her grandfather's death. Maya's pulse quickened as she realized she might be looking at his final official report. Had Jack Winters died knowing that his work, his trainees, or his methods were in danger? She photographed several pages with her phone, then carefully returned the journal to its hiding place. But as she turned to leave, her grandfather's desk caught her attention in a way it never had before. The surface was clean and organized, but Maya now noticed the subtle signs of a man who'd lived his entire life expecting threats. The desk faced the door, providing clear sightlines to anyone entering the apartment. A small mirror was positioned to reflect the stairway, allowing Jack to see who was approaching without being seen himself. Most telling of all, Maya discovered a concealed drawer activated by pressing 2 specific points on the desk's frame simultaneously, a security measure that suggested valuable or dangerous contents. Inside the hidden drawer was a satellite phone, still charged and apparently functional.
Next to it lay a single sheet of paper with contact information from military officials Maya didn't recognize, along with a handwritten note in her grandfather's precise script. Emergency protocols only. Trust no one claiming official authority without triple verification. Triple verification? Maya stared at the cryptic instruction, wondering if her grandfather had somehow anticipated a situation exactly like this one. The satellite phone represented a lifeline to legitimate military authority, but Jack's warning about false officials made her hesitate. How could she verify anything in the middle of a storm with potentially hostile forces already inside her building? Footsteps on the stairs interrupted her thoughts. Maya quickly closed the hidden drawer and moved to the window, pretending to check for storm damage. Jeremy Davis appeared in the doorway, his young face etched with anxiety. "Madam," he called softly, "Lieutenant Hartman sent me to check on you. Make sure you're okay." Maya turned, studying the young man's expression. Unlike Hartman's calculated professionalism, Jeremy's distress seemed genuine. His hands shook slightly, and his eyes kept darting toward the stairs as if expecting someone to follow him. "I'm fine," Maya replied carefully. "Just making sure the apartment is secure. This old building can leak during storms." Jeremy nodded but didn't leave. Instead, he stepped fully into the apartment and closed the door behind him, his movements furtive and desperate. "Madam, we're not who Hartman says we are. I mean, some of us were military, but we're not SEALs, and we're not on any training mission." Maya's heart hammered, but she forced herself to remain calm. Her grandfather's training notes had emphasized the importance of extracting information without revealing your own knowledge or intentions. "What do you mean?" she asked, moving closer, but keeping her voice low.
3 months ago, there was an incident at a training facility in Virginia. Jeremy's words tumbled out in a rush. Hartman was an instructor there, but he was selling information to foreign contacts. When the investigation started getting close, he convinced a bunch of us to run with him. The pieces began falling into place with terrifying clarity. Maya thought of her grandfather's final journal entry about a compromised training facility and missing personnel. Jeremy was describing exactly the kind of security breach that would have triggered Jack Winter's emergency protocols. "What kind of information?" Maya pressed. "Sealed training methods, psychological profiles, selection criteria, everything your grandfather developed over the years." Jeremy's voice cracked. "Hartman said if we stayed, we'd all be charged as accomplices. He made it sound like running was our only option." Maya's blood turned to ice. Her grandfather's life work, the techniques and insights he developed to forge America's most elite warriors, was being sold to hostile forces. The legacy she'd inherited wasn't just a marine supply store. It was the target of a betrayal that threatened national security. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I've been listening to the radio chatter. Those weren't our vehicles that got destroyed in the storm. Those belonged to the team that was chasing us." Jeremy's eyes filled with tears. "Hartman killed them, ma'am. He sabotaged their transport during the pursuit, and now he's planning to make it look like we all died in the storm, too." The full scope of Hartman's plan became clear with sickening certainty. By eliminating the pursuing team and his own accomplices, he could disappear completely while maintaining his cover story. Maya and anyone else who could identify him would become loose ends that needed tying up. "What does he want with my grandfather's store?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Your grandfather had backup files, additional training materials that never made it into the official records." Jeremy's voice was barely audible now. "Hartman thinks they're hidden here somewhere. He's been planning this for weeks, waiting for the right opportunity." Maya thought of the hidden compartment downstairs, of the journal and satellite phone upstairs, of all the secrets her grandfather had protected until his death. Jack Winters had built multiple layers of security into his life, apparently anticipating threats she was only beginning to understand. "Jeremy, I need you to listen carefully." Maya channeled the authority she'd heard in her grandfather's voice during his rare moments of seriousness. "My grandfather was more than just an instructor. He was the architect of the entire SEAL selection and training program. If Hartman gets access to his complete files, it would compromise every active SEAL team in the world," Jeremy finished, his face going white. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken, which meant their window of opportunity was closing. Soon, Hartman would make his move, eliminating witnesses and searching for the materials that could make him wealthy beyond imagination, while crippling America's most elite military unit. Maya made a decision that would have made Jack Winters proud. Instead of succumbing to fear, she began thinking tactically, applying lessons from a grandfather she was only now beginning to truly know.
How many of the others are willing to help stop this, she asked. 3 of us never wanted to be part of Hartman's scheme, but he has the weapons, and he's made it clear what happens to anyone who crosses him, Jeremy replied. Maya nodded, her mind racing through possibilities. Her grandfather's apartment contained resources Jeremy didn't know about, and the store itself was familiar territory she could navigate in complete darkness. Most importantly, she now understood that this wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting a legacy that could determine the future of American special operations. Then we need to change the odds, she said, moving toward her grandfather's hidden drawer. And I think I know exactly how Jack Winters would have handled this situation.
Maya's fingers found the satellite phone in her grandfather's hidden drawer, its military-grade construction feeling substantial and reassuring in her hands. As she powered it up, Jeremy watched nervously from the apartment door, listening for any sounds from downstairs that might indicate Hartman was growing suspicious of their extended absence. "Ma'am, we don't have much time," Jeremy whispered. "Hartman's been checking his watch constantly. I think he's waiting for something. Maybe confirmation that the pursuing team is really gone, or orders from whoever he's working for." The satellite phone's display came to life, showing full signal strength despite the storm. Maya stared at the contact list her grandfather had programmed, realizing each number represented a connection to the shadowy world of special operations that had defined his life. But which contact could she trust? Her grandfather's warning about triple verification echoed in her mind. She scrolled through the names, looking for clues. Most were military designations she didn't recognize, but one entry caught her attention. Amanda Cross, emergency only, Kodiak verification protocol. The name was followed by a string of numbers that looked like some kind of authentication code. "Jeremy, do you know anyone named Amanda Cross?" Maya asked. The young man's face immediately brightened with recognition and relief. "Captain Cross, yes, ma'am. She was the investigating officer looking into Hartman's activities. Real deal. Career Navy, impeccable record. If anyone can help us, it's her." Maya's thumb hovered over the call button. Once she made contact with legitimate military authority, there would be no going back. But as she thought about her grandfather's life work being sold to hostile forces, about the brave men and women whose lives would be endangered by Hartman's betrayal, the choice became clear. The call connected after 2 rings, despite the late hour and terrible weather conditions. "This is Captain Cross. State your emergency and authentication code." Maya looked at the numbers her grandfather had written, realizing they weren't just random digits. They were coordinates. The exact latitude and longitude of Kodiak's marine outfitters. "Captain Cross, this is Maya Winters, calling from these coordinates. I'm Jack Winters' granddaughter, and I'm using his emergency protocol. I have Lieutenant Cole Hartman and 5 other men in my building claiming to be Navy SEALs, but I have reason to believe they're the fugitives you've been hunting." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several heartbeats before Captain Cross responded, her voice sharp with urgency. "Miss Winters, are you in immediate danger?" "Yes, ma'am. One of the men with Hartman has informed me that they're not legitimate military personnel and that Hartman has been selling SEAL training information to foreign contacts. He believes Hartman killed the team that was pursuing them and plans to eliminate witnesses." "Jeremy Davis," Cross said immediately. "Is Davis your source?" Maya looked at Jeremy, who nodded emphatically. "Yes, ma'am." "Miss Winters, listen carefully. We lost contact with our pursuit team 4 hours ago during the storm. Hartman is considered extremely dangerous. He's a trained killer who's already murdered his commanding officer and at least 3 other personnel. Do not, under any circumstances, let him know you've made contact with us." Maya's throat constricted. The situation was even worse than she had imagined. "What should I do?" "How familiar are you with your grandfather's work?" Cross asked. And something in her tone suggested this wasn't just a casual question. "I'm learning," Maya replied, glancing at Jeremy. "I found some of his training materials and journals. It seems like he was more important to the SEAL program than anyone in my family realized." Captain Cross's voice took on a note of profound respect. "Miss Winters, your grandfather was a legend in our community. Commander Jack Kodiak Winters didn't just contribute to the SEAL training program, he created it. Every technique we use to select and forge our warriors came from his mind. He saved more lives and prevented more casualties than any single individual in the history of special operations." The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow.
Her quiet grandfather, the man who'd fixed boat engines and sold fishing tackle, had been one of the most influential military minds of his generation. The weight of his legacy and the responsibility of protecting it settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. The materials Hartman is seeking, Cross continued, they contain psychological profiles and training methods that could compromise every active SEAL team if they fall into the wrong hands. Your grandfather spent his final years creating additional security protocols because he knew someone might eventually try to steal his life's work. Maya thought of the hidden compartments, the emergency contacts, the careful way her grandfather had arranged his living space to detect and counter threats. Even in retirement, Jack Winters had been protecting the warriors he had helped create.
"Captain, how long before you can reach us?" Maya asked. "We have a helicopter en route, but the storm is still too severe for safe landing. You need to delay Hartman for at least 2 hours, maybe 3. 2 hours felt like an eternity when dealing with a trained killer who was growing increasingly suspicious. Maya looked around her grandfather's apartment with new eyes, wondering what other surprises he might have left behind. "Ma'am," Jeremy whispered urgently from the door, "I can hear Hartman talking to Murphy downstairs. I think they're getting ready to make their move." Maya made a decision that channeled every lesson about courage and sacrifice she'd absorbed from her grandfather's journals. "Captain Cross, I'm going to implement whatever security protocols my grandfather left behind. If these materials are as important as you say, then I'll do whatever it takes to protect them." "Miss Winters," Cross's voice carried a mixture of admiration and concern, "your grandfather trained some of the bravest warriors in the world, but you're a civilian. Don't try to be a hero." "With respect, Captain, I'm Jack Winters' granddaughter," Maya replied, feeling a surge of inherited determination. "Being a hero isn't something you try to do, it's something you become when you refuse to let evil win." As Maya ended the call and returned the satellite phone to its hiding place, she caught sight of her reflection in her grandfather's mirror. For the first time, she could see the resemblance Jeremy had noticed earlier, something in her eyes that matched the steely determination in her grandfather's old photographs. "Jeremy, I need you to go back downstairs and act normal. Don't let Hartman know anything has changed. Can you identify which of the other men might help us?" Finn and Marcus were both coerced into this just like me. They're good men who made bad choices when they got scared. But Peterson and Murphy are true believers. They'll follow Hartman anywhere. Maya nodded, already formulating a plan based on her grandfather's tactical principles. Divide and conquer. Use superior knowledge of the terrain. Force the enemy to react to your moves rather than the reverse. "Go," she said. "In 30 minutes, find a reason to bring Finn and Marcus up here separately. Tell them you discovered something they need to see, but don't let the others know. Can you do that?" Jeremy straightened, and for a moment, Maya caught a glimpse of the soldier he might have become under different circumstances. "Yes, ma'am. I won't let you down." As Jeremy disappeared down the stairs, Maya began her own preparations. Her grandfather's apartment was about to become a classroom where she would teach 3 frightened young men the most important lesson Jack Winters had ever developed. Sometimes, survival depends on finding the courage to fight back against impossible odds. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but Maya Winters had found something stronger than wind and rain. She'd found the warrior's heart that had been sleeping in her blood, waiting for the moment when honor demanded everything and retreat was not an option. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya spent the next 25 minutes transforming her grandfather's apartment into a briefing room that would have made Jack Winters proud. She arranged the hidden materials on his desk, photographs of real SEAL training operations, excerpts from his psychological evaluation notes, and most importantly, documentation that proved Hartman's betrayal ran deeper than even Jeremy had realized. When Jeremy returned with Finn O'Brien, Maya could see immediately why her grandfather would have flagged him as SEAL material. Despite the fear and confusion of the past 3 months, Finn carried himself with natural leadership qualities that couldn't be completely suppressed. He was older than Jeremy, maybe 26, with the kind of steady presence that came from genuine military experience. "Ma'am," Finn said quietly, his Irish accent barely detectable, "Davis says you know the truth about what we're mixed up in." Maya gestured to the chair across from her grandfather's desk, positioning herself in the same authoritative posture she'd seen Jack use during his rare, serious conversations. The psychology of leadership was apparently genetic, passed down through example and observation, even when she hadn't realized she was learning. "Finn, I need you to look at these photographs and tell me if you recognize anyone," Maya said, spreading out several images from her grandfather's collection. Finn's eyes widened as he studied the pictures. "That's Commander Sullivan from the Virginia facility, and Lieutenant Hayes, and—" His voice trailed off as he pointed to a younger version of Hartman in proper military dress uniform. "Hartman is in these photos, but he looks different, more legitimate." "These were taken during a legitimate training exercise my grandfather supervised in 2019, Maya explained. "Notice anything about Hartman's position in the group formations?" Finn studied the images more carefully. He's always in the background, never in positions of actual authority. And his gear, it's regulation, but it's too new, too clean, like someone who's trying to look the part without actually earning it. Maya felt a surge of pride in Finn's observational skills. Her grandfather's training methods emphasized the importance of reading details that others might miss. My grandfather kept detailed psychological profiles of everyone who passed through his programs, including assessment notes about individuals who showed concerning patterns. She read directly from her grandfather's precise handwriting. "Subject C. Hartman demonstrates exceptional technical knowledge but lacks the moral foundation essential for special operations. Recommendation: suitable for support roles only. Do not advance to combat training." Note: exhibits sociopathic markers that could become problematic under stress. Finn's face went pale. "Your grandfather flagged Hartman as unstable?" More than that, he recommended Hartman never be given access to classified training methods or psychological profiles. Maya turned the page, revealing additional notes. "My grandfather believed Hartman would eventually try to monetize military secrets for personal gain." The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted their conversation. Jeremy appeared with Marcus Thompson, a stocky young man whose nervous energy filled the small apartment. Marcus had the look of someone who'd been carrying an unbearable burden for months. "Ma'am," Marcus said before anyone could speak, "I need to tell you something about what happened at the Virginia facility." Maya nodded, expanding her circle to include both new arrivals. "Go ahead, Marcus." "Hartman didn't just sell training information." Marcus's voice cracked with emotion. "He murdered Commander Sullivan when Sullivan discovered what he was doing, made it look like a training accident, but I saw what really happened." The apartment fell silent except for the storm outside and the distant rumble of the generator. Maya felt the weight of her grandfather's legacy pressing down on her, understanding now why Jack Winters had built so many layers of security into his life. "How many people know the truth?" Maya asked. "Just us three," Jeremy replied. "Peterson and Murphy either don't know or don't care. They've been with Hartman from the beginning." Maya studied the faces of the three young men, seeing in them the same qualities her grandfather had spent his life identifying and nurturing. They'd made mistakes, been manipulated by someone who understood their weaknesses, but underneath the fear and confusion were the seeds of genuine courage. "Here's what's going to happen," Maya said, channeling every leadership lesson she'd absorbed from her grandfather's journals. "Captain Amanda Cross from Naval Special Warfare Command is en route with a rescue team, but they can't reach us for at least 2 hours because of the storm conditions." "You made contact with the outside?" Finn asked, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time since entering the apartment. "My grandfather built this place with multiple communication systems specifically for situations like this,"
Maya replied, gesturing toward the hidden drawer. He spent his final years preparing for the possibility that his work might be compromised.
She opened her grandfather's journal to a section marked Emergency Protocols and read aloud. In situations where legitimate authority has been corrupted, small unit tactics become essential. Trust must be earned through shared risk and demonstrated commitment to mission success over personal survival. Maya looked at each man individually, making eye contact the way her grandfather had taught her to assess character under pressure. Hartman is planning to eliminate all witnesses, including the three of you. He's already killed the team that was pursuing him, and he'll kill us too once he finds what he's looking for. What is he looking for? Marcus asked. The complete psychological profiles and training methods my grandfather developed over 30 years, Maya replied. Information that could compromise every active SEAL team in the world if it falls into enemy hands. The implications hit all three men simultaneously. They weren't just running from military justice. They were carrying the responsibility for protecting the lives of every special operations warrior currently serving. So what do we do? Jeremy asked. Maya smiled, and for the first time since inheriting the store, she felt truly connected to her grandfather's legacy. We do what Jack Winters trained his warriors to do. We turn the tables on our enemies, we protect what matters most, and we make sure the good guys win. She pulled out a hand-drawn map of the store's layout that her grandfather had apparently created for exactly this purpose. Every room, every hiding place, every potential advantage was marked with military precision. This building has features you don't know about, Maya explained. My grandfather designed it to be defensible in case his work was ever threatened. Hidden passages, emergency supplies, communication equipment, and yes, weapons. Weapons? Finn's eyebrows rose. My grandfather didn't just train warriors, Maya replied, opening another hidden compartment to reveal a small arsenal of military-grade equipment. He prepared for war. As she distributed tactical gear that had been maintained in perfect condition despite her grandfather's death, Maya felt the transformation completing itself. She was no longer just Maya Winters, marine biology researcher turned reluctant business owner. She was the granddaughter of Commander Jack Kodiak Winters, and she had inherited more than property and inventory. She'd inherited a war. Gentlemen, she said, checking the action on her grandfather's service pistol, it's time to show Lieutenant Hartman what happens when you threaten a SEAL training facility, even a retired one. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken, which meant their window of opportunity was narrowing. But inside Kodiak's Marine Outfitters, the real storm was just beginning. Maya's tactical briefing was interrupted by the sound of Hartman's voice echoing up from the store below, his tone sharp with growing suspicion and barely controlled anger. Davis, where the hell are you, and where are O'Brien and Thompson? The four conspirators froze, realizing their extended absence had finally triggered Hartman's paranoia. Maya could hear his footsteps pacing across the store's main floor, accompanied by the heavier movements of Peterson and Murphy as they spread out to search the building. We need to get back down there, Finn whispered urgently. If he gets suspicious enough to come up here... No, Maya said quietly, her grandfather's tactical training overriding the impulse to panic. He's already suspicious. Going back now would only confirm his fears. We need to accelerate our timeline. She moved to her grandfather's window, which provided a clear view of the parking lot and the vehicles Hartman's team had arrived in. What she saw made her blood run cold. Peterson was outside, despite the storm, working on something under the hood of their transport vehicles. He's sabotaging the vehicles, Maya realized, making sure no one can leave. Marcus joined her at the window, his face grim. That's his standard procedure. Hartman always eliminates escape routes before making his final move. The sound of boots on the stairs made everyone in the apartment tense. Hartman's voice carried clearly through the old building's thin walls. I know you're up there, all of you. This little reunion ends now.
Maya felt the weight of her grandfather's pistol in her hand and the responsibility of his legacy on her shoulders. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than expected, but Jack Winters had trained his warriors to adapt to changing circumstances. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, "welcome to your first real SEAL training exercise." She positioned Jeremy near the apartment's back window, which opened onto the store's rear fire escape. Finn took cover behind her grandfather's heavy wooden dresser, while Marcus crouched beside the door with a clear view of the stairway. "Hartman," Maya called down the stairs, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "We need to talk." "The talking's over, sweetheart. You've been busy tonight, haven't you? Making phone calls, having little conferences. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Maya exchanged glances with Jeremy, who looked pale but determined. Their amateur espionage had been more transparent than they had hoped, but it had served its purpose. They now knew exactly where everyone stood. "I know who you really are, Hartman. I know about Commander Sullivan, about the Virginia facility, about everything you've done." Hartman's laughter was cold and calculating. "What you know doesn't matter, because dead witnesses don't testify. But before we finish this, I want those files your grandfather hid. The complete psychological profiles, the advanced training methods, all of it. And if I refuse, then I start with your new friends up there. Davis first, since he's been so chatty, then O'Brien and Thompson. You can listen to them die while you think about how cooperation might have saved their lives." Maya felt a surge of rage that surprised her with its intensity. This was what her grandfather had spent his life fighting against, the corruption of everything the military stood for by individuals who put personal gain above honor and duty. "Hartman," Maya called, "my grandfather left something for people like you, a special message." "What kind of message?" Maya opened her grandfather's journal to a page she'd marked earlier, one containing his thoughts on betrayal within military ranks. She read aloud in a voice that carried clearly through the building. "The greatest enemy of the warrior is not the foreign adversary or the hostile environment. It is the corrupted brother who wears the uniform while serving his own interests. Such individuals forfeit all claim to honor and deserve no mercy from those they have betrayed." The silence that followed was only broken by the storm outside and the rumble of the generator. When Hartman spoke again, his voice had taken on a new edge of genuine menace. "Your grandfather was a naive old man who thought honor mattered more than survival. I'm about to teach you what happens to people who make that mistake." The tactical situation deteriorated rapidly as Peterson's voice joined the conversation from the store's back entrance. "Lieutenant, I've got the rear exit covered. Murphy's in position by the front door. Nobody's leaving this building." Maya realized they were now completely surrounded, trapped in the apartment with limited ammunition and no clear escape route. This was exactly the kind of scenario her grandfather's training had been designed to address: overwhelming odds, hostile forces, and the need to protect critical intelligence at all costs.
She activated the emergency beacon hidden in her grandfather's communication system, sending a priority distress signal to Captain Cross. Even if rescue was still hours away, at least the outside world would know what had happened here. "Maya," Finn whispered from his position behind the dresser, "we need to consider surrender. Maybe we can negotiate." "No," Maya replied firmly, channeling every lesson about courage under fire she'd absorbed from her grandfather's journals. "Hartman can't afford to leave witnesses, and he won't stop hunting for these files as long as any of us are alive to identify him." She looked around the apartment, seeing it now as her grandfather would have, not as a living space, but as a tactical environment with defensive advantages and strategic weaknesses. The heavy furniture could provide cover, the multiple windows offered different fields of fire, and most importantly, Jack Winters had built this place with exactly this situation in mind. "There's something I haven't told you about this building," Maya said, moving to what appeared to be a solid wall next to her grandfather's bookshelf. "My grandfather was paranoid about being trapped, so he built multiple exit strategies into his design." She pressed a concealed switch, and a section of the wall swung inward to reveal a narrow passage that seemed to lead directly into the building's structural supports. "Emergency escape route," Maya explained. "It connects to the old boat repair shop next door." "Jeremy, I need you to take this passage and get to the Marine radio in the next building. Contact the Coast Guard directly and tell them we have hostile forces at this location." "What about you?" Jeremy asked. Maya checked the ammunition in her grandfather's pistol and picked up a tactical flashlight from his emergency supplies. "Finn, Marcus, and I are going to give Hartman exactly what he's looking for, a fight with someone who learned from the best SEAL trainer who ever lived." As Jeremy disappeared into the hidden passage, Maya felt the final pieces of her transformation clicking into place. She was no longer the granddaughter trying to live up to Jack Winter's legacy. She was her worthy successor, ready to defend everything he had built and believed in. "Hartman," she called down the stairs one final time, "you want my grandfather's files? Come and take them." Hartman's response came in the form of gunfire that splintered the wooden steps leading to the apartment. Maya and her allies dove for cover as bullets tore through the thin walls of the old building, sending fragments of wood and plaster cascading across the floor. The smell of cordite filled the air, mixing with the salt spray that still penetrated the building despite the weakening storm. "So much for negotiation," Finn muttered from behind the dresser, checking his grandfather's service rifle that Maya had distributed from the hidden weapons cache. Maya pressed herself against the wall beside the stairway, listening to the tactical communication between Hartman and his remaining loyal followers. Their military training was evident in their coordinated movements, but Maya had something they didn't expect: intimate knowledge of the building's layout and the strategic advantages her grandfather had built into its design. "Peterson, maintain overwatch on the rear exit. Murphy, cover the front entrance. I'm going up." "Copy that, Lieutenant," Peterson responded from outside. Maya smiled grimly, realizing Hartman was making exactly the mistake her grandfather's tactical notes had warned against, assuming the enemy would behave predictably. Jack Winters have designed this building for asymmetrical warfare, where a smaller defending force could neutralize superior numbers through superior positioning and local knowledge. She activated another of her grandfather's hidden features, flipping a concealed switch that cut power to the main floor, while maintaining electricity to the apartment. The store below plunged into darkness, eliminating Hartman's visual advantage while preserving her team's ability to coordinate their defense. "What the hell?" Hartman's voice betrayed his first hint of genuine uncertainty. Maya used the confusion to implement the next phase of her grandfather's defensive strategy. She opened a panel in the apartment floor that revealed a speaking tube connecting directly to the store's main level, a communication system Jack had installed to monitor customer conversations and detect potential threats. "Hartman," her voice echoed through the darkened store below, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. "My grandfather spent 30 years preparing for people like you. This building is his masterpiece, a training facility disguised as a simple marine supply store." "You're bluffing," Hartman shouted back, but Maya could hear the edge of doubt in his voice. "Am I? Tell me, how did you know to look for files in this specific location? Did your foreign contacts provide that intelligence? Or did you figure it out yourself?" The silence that followed confirmed Maya's suspicion. Hartman wasn't working alone. He had backing from hostile intelligence services, who had identified her grandfather as a high-value target years ago. "Marcus," Maya whispered to her ally positioned near the door, "when I give the signal, I want you to create a distraction. Nothing dangerous, just something to draw Hartman's attention." Marcus nodded, understanding the importance of timing in tactical operations. Maya then turned to Finn, who had proven himself to be the most naturally gifted of her grandfather's inadvertent students. "Finn, there's a second stairway on the far side of the building. It's concealed behind what looks like a supply closet door. When Hartman commits to coming up the main stairs, you're going to flank him from behind." "What about you?" Finn asked. "I'm going to give him exactly what he expects, a scared granddaughter defending her inheritance. Sometimes the best tactics involve letting your enemy underestimate you." Maya moved to her grandfather's desk, where she discovered one final surprise among her papers. Hidden beneath the leather blotter was a detailed floor plan of the building, showing features she'd never known existed. Jack Winters hadn't just owned a marine supply store. He'd operated a clandestine training facility where he could test new psychological warfare techniques on unsuspecting subjects.
The speaking tube carried Hartman's voice as he began his assault on the main stairway. "I'm coming up, Maya. You can make this easy or hard, but either way, I'm getting those files." Maya responded by activating her grandfather's most ingenious defensive feature. Hidden speakers throughout the building began playing recordings of sealed training exercises, the sounds of men under extreme stress, shouting orders and coordinated team movements. To someone attacking the building, it would sound like a much larger defensive force was preparing for battle. "What the hell?" Peterson's voice crackled over the radio. "Lieutenant, it sounds like there's a whole platoon in there." "It's psychological warfare," Hartman replied, but Maya could hear the uncertainty growing in his voice. The old man was famous for that kind of manipulation. Maya smiled, realizing her grandfather was still fighting beside her even in death. The psychological profiles in his journal had prepared her for exactly this type of enemy, someone whose confidence depended on maintaining the illusion of control and superior knowledge.
As Hartman reached the midpoint of the stairway, Maya implemented the next phase of her defense. She activated a series of motion sensor lights that her grandfather had installed throughout the apartment, creating a strobing effect that would disorient anyone not familiar with the pattern. "Now, Marcus," Maya whispered. Marcus knocked over a stack of metal containers, creating a loud crash that drew Hartman's immediate attention. In that moment of distraction, Finn slipped out through the concealed passage Maya had revealed, beginning his flanking maneuver through the building's hidden passages. Maya positioned herself behind her grandfather's desk, using his heavy oak furniture as cover, while maintaining clear sight lines to both the main stairway and the apartment's primary entrance. The tactical situation was still desperate, but she was beginning to understand why her grandfather had been so confident in his defensive preparations. "Maya!" Hartman's voice was closer now, probably just a few steps from the apartment level. "I know you can hear me. Your little tricks aren't going to save you." "Maybe not," Maya called back, "but they're going to give my friends enough time to complete their mission." "What mission?" Maya's response was calculated to increase Hartman's paranoia and force him into making tactical mistakes. "The mission my grandfather planned for situations exactly like this. Did you really think Jack Winters would leave his life's work unprotected?" The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Jeremy's voice crackling over the marine radio from the adjoining building. "Mayday, Mayday! This is Jeremy Davis, broadcasting on emergency frequency. We have hostile forces at Kodiak's Marine Outfitters on Highway 101. Request immediate military assistance. Repeat, we are under attack by rogue military personnel." Hartman's response was immediate and violent. Gunfire erupted as he charged up the remaining steps, his discipline finally cracking under the pressure of his deteriorating situation. Maya ducked as bullets shattered her grandfather's window and sent books flying from his shelves. But as Hartman burst into the apartment, weapon raised and murder in his eyes, he discovered that Maya Winters had learned the most important lesson from her grandfather's training methods. The best defense wasn't always about superior firepower or tactical positioning. Sometimes it was about being exactly where your enemy expected you to be, while your real attack came from where they least expected it. As Hartman focused on Maya's position behind the desk, Finn O'Brien emerged from the concealed stairway behind him, moving with the silent precision of a warrior who had finally found his true calling. The confrontation in the apartment lasted less than 30 seconds, but those seconds contained a lifetime of violence, courage, and the final revelation of who Paul Hartman really was beneath his stolen uniform and manufactured authority. Finn's appearance behind Hartman should have ended the threat immediately, but Maya's grandfather had trained her to expect the unexpected. Hartman spun with inhuman speed, his weapon tracking toward Finn even as Maya opened fire from her position behind the desk. The apartment exploded with gunfire, muzzle flashes strobing in the darkness like deadly lightning.
Maya's first shot caught Hartman in his shoulder, spinning him partially around, but not stopping his attack on Finn. Her second shot went wide as she dove for better cover, crashing into her grandfather's bookshelf and sending decades of military manuals cascading to the floor. But those precious seconds allowed Finn to find cover behind the heavy dresser and return fire with the tactical rifle Maya had given him. "Peterson! Murphy! Get up here now!" Hartman screamed into his radio, blood streaming from his wounded shoulder, but his weapon still tracking between Maya and Finn with deadly accuracy. But Maya had prepared for this contingency as well. As Peterson's boots pounded up the main stairway, Marcus Thompson stepped out from his concealed position beside the door. The young man who'd been manipulated and terrified for months had found his courage at exactly the right moment. "Drop your weapon," Marcus commanded, his grandfather's service pistol steady in his hands. "Peterson, you're under arrest for murder, treason, and conspiracy." Peterson's response was predictable. He swung his rifle toward Marcus, finger tightening on the trigger. But Maya had learned more from her grandfather's journals than just tactics and psychology. She'd learned about the warrior's instinct that separates those who survive from those who don't. As Peterson's attention focused on Marcus, Maya rolled out from behind the desk and put 2 rounds center mass into the man who'd helped murder an entire pursuit team. Peterson collapsed without firing a shot, his weapon clattering across the apartment floor. The tactical situation shifted again as Murphy's voice crackled over the radio from outside. "Lieutenant, I've got movement in the rear building. Looks like someone's trying to flank us." Jeremy's radio transmission had apparently been successful. Maya could hear the distant sound of helicopters approaching despite the continuing storm. But Hartman wasn't finished yet. "You think you've won?" he snarled, blood loss making his face pale, but his eyes still burning with murderous intent. "You know what the beautiful irony is? I'm trained to read people, to identify their weaknesses and exploit them. Everything I learned about psychological manipulation, I learned from him." "You're lying," Maya replied, but something in Hartman's eyes made her doubt her own words. "Am I? Check his journal again, sweetheart. Look for the entry dated March 15th, 2019. That's when Commander Jack Kodiak Winters first identified me as a security risk and recommended my removal from the program." Maya's heart sank as she realized what Hartman was implying. Her grandfather had recognized the threat Hartman represented, but institutional politics or bureaucratic delays had prevented him from eliminating that threat in time. "He knew you were dangerous and tried to stop you."
"He knew I was dangerous and tried to destroy my career," Hartman corrected. But what he didn't know was that I'd already made contact with people who appreciated my particular talents, people who were very interested in learning everything Jack Winters knew about breaking the human spirit and rebuilding it into something useful. The sound of helicopters was getting louder now, but Maya realized it might already be too late. If Hartman's foreign contacts already possessed her grandfather's preliminary files, the damage to American special operations could be catastrophic and irreversible. "Where are the copies?" Maya demanded, her finger tightening on the trigger. Hartman's smile was the expression of a man who believed he'd already won. "Safe and sound in Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran. By this time tomorrow, your grandfather's techniques for creating America's finest warriors will be used to create America's deadliest enemies." Maya felt the weight of her grandfather's legacy crushing down on her. Jack Winters had spent his life forging weapons to protect American freedom, only to have those same weapons turned against everything he'd believed in by someone he'd trusted with the sacred responsibility of training. But as she stared into Hartman's triumphant eyes, Maya remembered another passage from her grandfather's journal. "The enemy's greatest victory is convincing you that defeat is inevitable. Never surrender hope, because hope is the foundation of all tactical thinking." "You made one mistake, Hartman," Maya said, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. "What mistake?" "You assumed my grandfather kept his most important secrets in files that could be stolen." Maya smiled, and for the first time since the confrontation began, she saw doubt flicker in Hartman's eyes.
But Jack Winters was smarter than that. The real secrets aren't written down anywhere. You're bluffing. The psychological techniques, the selection criteria, the training methods that really matter, they're all up here. Maya tapped her temple, passed down through observation, through example, through the kind of mentorship that can't be documented or stolen. Hartman's expression shifted from triumph to uncertainty to growing rage. Impossible. No one person could memorize that much information. Not one person, Maya agreed. But what about all the SEALs my grandfather trained over 30 years? What about the officers who learned his methods, the psychologists who collaborated with him, the support staff who observed his techniques? The helicopters were directly overhead now, their rotor wash rattling the building's windows. Maya could hear voices shouting orders outside as Captain Cross's rescue team finally arrived. You can sell copies of his preliminary files to anyone who wants them, but you can't steal the living legacy he created in the minds and hearts of the warriors he trained. That knowledge is scattered across hundreds of people who would die before they'd betray their country. Hartman's final gambit came in the form of a concealed knife that appeared in his uninjured hand with practiced speed. But Maya had learned the most important lesson from her grandfather's training. Always be prepared for your enemy's last resort. As Hartman lunged forward, Maya didn't hesitate. The gunshot echoed through the apartment like thunder, and Cole Hartman collapsed to the floor of Jack Winter's sanctuary. His betrayal finally ended.
The silence that followed Hartman's death was broken by the sound of boots pounding up the stairs and Captain Amanda Cross's authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. "Federal agents, everyone put your weapons down and identify yourselves." Maya carefully placed her grandfather's pistol on the desk and raised her hands, relief flooding through her system as she realized the nightmare was finally over. Finn and Marcus followed her example, their faces showing the same mixture of exhaustion and disbelief that comes after surviving the impossible. "Captain Cross," Maya called out, "this is Maya Winters. Hartman is down, Peterson is down. We have Murphy still unaccounted for outside." "Murphy surrendered when he saw our helicopters," Cross replied as she entered the apartment, her tactical gear still dripping from the storm outside. She surveyed the scene with professional efficiency, taking in the bullet holes, the scattered papers, and the bodies of the men who'd betrayed everything the uniform represented. Captain Cross was exactly what Maya had expected from her grandfather's contact, a compact woman in her 40s with steel-gray eyes and the bearing of someone who'd spent her career dealing with the darkest aspects of military service. She knelt beside Hartman's body, checking for signs of life, before turning her attention to the surviving witnesses. "Miss Winters," Cross said, her tone mixing respect with urgent concern, "we need to debrief immediately. Based on Jeremy Davis's radio transmission, Hartman claimed to have already transmitted classified materials to foreign contacts." Maya nodded grimly. "He said copies of my grandfather's preliminary files were already in Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran. His mission wasn't just about stealing the information, it was about destroying the psychological foundation of the SEAL program." Cross's expression darkened as she absorbed the implications. "That's consistent with intelligence we've been gathering about a coordinated effort to compromise American special operations capabilities. Your grandfather was one of several targets, but he was the primary objective." Over the next hour, as Cross's team secured the scene and processed evidence, the full scope of the conspiracy began to emerge. Hartman hadn't been working alone. He was part of a network of corrupted military personnel who'd been systematically targeted and recruited by hostile intelligence services. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Use America's own training methods against her by corrupting the people responsible for developing those methods. The good news, Cross explained as she reviewed Hartman's equipment and communications devices, is that the preliminary files he transmitted were incomplete. Your grandfather was paranoid about information security. He never put his most critical insights into any system that could be hacked or stolen. Maya felt a surge of pride in her grandfather's foresight. Even in retirement, Jack Winters was thinking 3 steps ahead of his enemies. "The bad news," Cross continued, "is that Hartman's backers know about this location and the potential value of what's hidden here. This won't be the last attempt to compromise your grandfather's legacy."
Maya looked around the apartment that had become a battlefield, seeing it now as both sanctuary and target. Every hidden compartment, every secret passage, every carefully placed defensive feature represented years of preparation by a man who'd understood that some wars never really end. "What happens now?" Finn asked. He'd been quiet during the initial debriefing, but Maya could see him processing everything he'd experienced and learned over the past few hours. "Now we clean up the mess and make sure the right people know what really happened," Cross replied. "Davis, O'Brien, and Thompson will face court-martial for desertion, but their cooperation tonight will weigh heavily in their favor. They'll serve time, but they'll serve it with honor restored." Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady despite everything he'd endured. "Captain, we need to tell you about the other personnel at the Virginia facility. Hartman convinced dozens of people to desert, but most of them were coerced through threats and manipulation. They're good soldiers who made bad choices because they were scared." Cross nodded approvingly. "That intelligence will be crucial for our recovery operations. We've been tracking the missing personnel for months, but we didn't know how deep Hartman's influence went." As the debriefing continued, Maya found herself thinking about the transformation she'd undergone in a single night. 18 hours ago, she'd been a marine biology researcher struggling to run an inherited business. Now she was the guardian of secrets that could affect the security of every special operations warrior in the American military. "Ms. Winters," Cross said, pulling Maya aside for a private conversation, "I need to discuss your grandfather's materials and what happens to them going forward." Maya gestured toward the hidden compartment where Jack's journal and other documents remained concealed. "I've been thinking about that. My grandfather spent his life protecting these secrets, and tonight proved they're still valuable to America's enemies."
What are you proposing? "I want to donate everything to the Naval Special Warfare Command," Maya replied. "The building, the equipment, all of his records and training materials. But I want it done with the kind of security protocols he would have insisted on." Cross smiled for the first time since entering the apartment. "Your grandfather would be proud of that decision. We can establish this location as an official training facility, a place where his methods can be studied and preserved by people who understand their true value." Maya nodded, feeling the weight of her inheritance shifting from burden to purpose. "There's one condition. I want to be involved in the transition. I've spent the night learning about my grandfather's work, and I think I've inherited more than just his property." "What do you mean?" Maya looked at Finn, Marcus, and Jeremy, seeing in them the same qualities her grandfather had spent his life identifying and nurturing. "I think I've inherited his ability to recognize potential warriors and help them find their true calling." As dawn broke over the Oregon coast, painting the storm-washed landscape in shades of gold and silver, Maya Winters stood at her grandfather's window and realized that some legacies couldn't be stolen, corrupted, or destroyed. They could only be passed on to those worthy of carrying them forward. Captain Cross approached with a secure satellite phone. "Miss Winters, there's someone who wants to speak with you." Maya accepted the phone, wondering what new chapter of her grandfather's story was about to unfold. "This is Admiral Richardson, commander of Naval Special Warfare," the voice on the other end said. "Miss Winters, I served under your grandfather in the early days of the SEAL program. I wanted to personally thank you for protecting his legacy and for showing the same courage he would have shown in your situation." Maya felt tears she hadn't realized were building finally begin to fall. "Admiral, I just did what seemed right." "That's exactly what your grandfather would have said," Richardson replied. "And that's why I'd like to offer you a position with our psychological evaluation team. We need someone who understands both the technical aspects of his work and the moral foundation that made it effective." As Maya considered the offer, she realized her transformation was complete. She was no longer just Jack Winters' granddaughter. She was his successor, ready to carry his mission into a new generation of warriors who would need every advantage in an increasingly dangerous world.
6 months later, Maya Winters stood in the same spot where she'd first discovered her grandfather's hidden compartment, but everything about Kodiak's Marine Outfitters had changed. The building now officially served as the Jack
Kodiak Winters Center for Advanced Psychological Operations, a classified facility where the next generation of SEAL trainers learned the techniques that had made her grandfather a legend. The transformation hadn't been easy. Federal investigators had spent weeks cataloging every document, every hidden feature, every ingenious defensive modification Jack Winters had built into his seemingly simple marine supply store. What they'd discovered had shocked even seasoned special operations veterans. The building contained the most sophisticated training laboratory ever created by a single individual. Maya walked through the renovated space, noting how carefully the renovation team had preserved her grandfather's vision while adding modern security features and training equipment. The main floor still looked like a marine supply store to casual observers, but now it served as a cover for psychological evaluation sessions where potential SEALs underwent the most rigorous mental testing in military history. The hidden passages had been expanded and reinforced, creating a three-dimensional training environment where candidates could be subjected to stress scenarios that tested every aspect of their psychological resilience. The apartment upstairs had become a monitoring center where Maya and her team of military psychologists observed and evaluated potential warriors with scientific precision. "Dr. Winters," a voice called from behind her. Maya turned to see Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, her newest colleague and the officer responsible for implementing her grandfather's selection protocols in modern SEAL training. "How many times do I have to tell you to call me Maya?" she replied, though she still felt a thrill at being addressed by her new title. The PhD in military psychology had been accelerated through a joint program between the Naval War College and Stanford University, recognizing her unique insights into her grandfather's methods. "The morning evaluation results are ready for your review," Chen continued, handing Maya a tablet containing psychological profiles of the latest candidates. "We're seeing the same patterns your grandfather identified. About 12% of applicants possess the core psychological markers for elite special operations." Maya reviewed the data, her trained eye now able to spot the subtle indicators that separated future SEALs from well-meaning but unsuitable candidates. The science her grandfather had developed through instinct and experience was now codified into precise metrics that could predict success rates with remarkable accuracy. "What about the 3 from the Oregon incident?" Maya asked. Chen smiled. "O'Brien, Thompson, and Davis all completed their sentences and have been cleared for return to active duty. All 3 requested assignment to SEAL training, and all 3 passed the preliminary psychological evaluation with exceptional scores." Maya felt a surge of satisfaction. The 3 young men who'd found their courage in her grandfather's apartment had indeed possessed the qualities Jack Winters would have recognized immediately. Their experience with Hartman had been a brutal form of field testing, but it had revealed character that formal training might have taken months to identify. "There's something else," Chen added, her tone becoming more serious. "Intelligence reports indicate that Hartman's network was larger than we initially realized. We've identified at least 6 other attempts to compromise military training facilities over the past year." Maya nodded grimly. The enemy's campaign against American special operations was ongoing, but her grandfather's legacy was proving to be an effective defense. Every trainer who learned his methods, every facility that implemented his security protocols, every candidate who underwent his evaluation process represented a strengthening of the psychological foundation that made elite warriors possible. The intercom crackled with an announcement that brought Maya back to the present moment. "Dr. Winters, please report to Conference Room Alpha. Admiral Richardson is standing by for the monthly briefing." Maya made her way to the secure communication center that had been built in what was once her grandfather's bedroom. The technology was state-of-the-art, but she had insisted on keeping Jack's old desk and chair, tangible reminders of the man whose vision had made all of this possible. Admiral Richardson's weathered face filled the secure video screen as Maya activated the connection. Behind him, she could see the Pentagon's Special Operations Command Center, where decisions were made that affected warriors around the world. "Maya," Richardson greeted her with the informal warmth that had developed over months of collaboration. "How are our newest candidates progressing?" "Exceptionally well, sir," Maya replied, consulting the latest training reports.
We're maintaining a 93% success rate for candidates who pass through the Kodiak evaluation protocol. That's 15% higher than traditional selection methods.
Outstanding. And what about the international situation? Any new intelligence about foreign attempts to compromise our training methods? Maya's expression became serious. We're tracking 7 active operations targeting SEAL training facilities worldwide. The leaked materials from Hartman's network are being used to develop counter-training programs in at least 4 hostile nations. But they don't have the complete picture, Richardson stated rather than asked. No, sir. My grandfather's most critical insights were never written down. They exist only in the institutional knowledge of trainers who learned directly from him, and now in the minds of those we're training to carry his work forward. Richardson nodded approvingly. That was always Jack's greatest strength, understanding that the most valuable knowledge couldn't be stolen because it lived in human relationships, not filing cabinets. As the briefing concluded, Maya found herself thinking about the night that had changed everything. The storm had passed, the enemies had been defeated, and justice had been served. But more importantly, she discovered a purpose that connected her to something larger than herself. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Jeremy Davis, who was currently in the 3rd week of SEAL training at Coronado. Dr. Winters, wanted you to know I made it through Hell Week. Your grandfather's lessons about mental resilience saved my life. Thank you for believing in us. Maya smiled, remembering Jack's words from his journal. The greatest victory is not defeating your enemy. It's creating something so strong that your enemy's attacks only make it stronger. As evening approached and Maya prepared to lock up the facility, she stopped at her grandfather's memorial wall. His photograph now held the place of honor among dozens of images showing SEAL teams in action around the world. Warriors whose training had been shaped by methods developed in this very building. "We did it, Grandpa," she whispered to the image. "Your legacy is secure and it's growing stronger every day." Outside, the Oregon coast stretched endlessly under a clear sky, its waves carrying the same eternal rhythm that had inspired Jack Winters to build his sanctuary. But now that sanctuary served a new purpose, not just protecting those who served, but ensuring that future generations would possess the psychological strength to face whatever challenges awaited them. Maya Winters had inherited more than a building or a business. She'd inherited a mission that would define the rest of her life, and she'd never been more ready to accept that responsibility. The granddaughter who'd never known her grandfather had become the guardian of his greatest gift to America, the knowledge of how to forge ordinary people into extraordinary warriors, one mind at a time.